Costanoans. Costanoans are also called Ohlone. Well, Costanoans was a general name given to the Native Americans that lived along the coast of California by the Spanish. But Ohlone is a name of a smaller tribe within the Costanoans, or a smaller tribe, within the Costanoans, which they preferred. So they just Native Americans prefer to call themselves Ohlone rather than Costanoans because it was big. But yeah. So there's different tribes within the Ohlone group, and since my focus was in Cornell, it was mainly the Rumsen tribe. But yeah, okay. So the Rumsen tribe, they're a hunter-gatherer group. So basically, they lived off the land for food and supplies for survival. So the different types they ate were like wild grapes, salmon. They had a whole bunch of flowers, antelope, deer, elk, grizzly bears, an occasional whale if it beached up on the shore, berries. They had razor clams, a bunch of crustaceans. One of the ones was insects. Lice was one that I saw that when the Spanish saw them eating lice from each other's heads, they thought it was pretty disgusting. So that, and then one of the interesting ones was the way that they caught antelope. They would, hunters would wrap antelope skin around their ankles and then they would go to meadows where there was high grass and they would go on their back and they would swing their arms and feet up in the air, and the antelope being curious, they would come over and then another hunter would just shoot them. And then another one is the acorns. The acorns were a staple diet for the Costanoans. They, how they basically process them is they would get them, they would hull them, and then they would grind them in their mortar and pestle, and then they would winnow them, and that's basically just tossing them up in the air, and then the hulls would get pushed out by the winds, and then the meal would fall on the floor. And then after, with the meal, they have tannin acid in them, and in high quantities it's poisonous, so they would bleach them. They would take water and just run it through them to take out all the tannin, and then after that they would make it into mushroom bread. So they ate a whole bunch of types of food, and it all depended on the seasons. Towards the winter, I believe they were out in the oak trees where they would harvest oak, and then out in the summer they would be more near the ocean for fish and all that stuff. So they didn't really have a form of agriculture. The closest thing that they had was the periodic burnings of the meadows. So this would help suppress shrubs, and then it favored the fauna that they liked, the flora, and then it fertilized the ground, and then it also brought in game. So it was basically a harvesting area and a ground for hunting. Next is the mission. So in the 1500s, the missions were part of the Spanish country. In the 1500s, the Spanish wanted to create or put a port in Alta California because of their, because they conquered the Philippines and they had the Philippine trade, and they wanted a port in between the Philippines and Mexico to hold the ships and just rest and get supplies and whatnot. So Monterey was like one of the ones where they thought it would be like really cool to have again. And they didn't really do anything during the 1500s, but in the 1700s, there were rumors of the Russians coming down California and starting to settle, so they wanted to protect that area, and they started developing over there. So the mission, their main goal supposedly was to just convert the natives into Catholicism and just spread the word. They also had to grow food for the troops and support them. So agriculture in the mission was important because Father Marquez, he came up with a book saying that the way to keep the Native Americans in the mission is to teach them agriculture. Because if you teach them agriculture, they become independent of the land, and then they don't have to roam. So they have time to stay in the missions and to go to church and to build labor. Yeah, that's Mission Carmel back in the 1800s. And then, so with the start of the the first mission was built in San Diego, and the second one was built in Monterey. But Father Serra, who is the founder of all the missions in California, he wanted to move the one from Monterey down to Carmel because it had access to the Carmel River and it had better soils. But the thing is with that is the Carmel River runs kind of low. Oh, sorry, this is a picture. This is the Carmel River meeting the bay. Carmel Bay. So the rivers ran low and the rainy season was pretty brief. So the agriculture depended on the humidity and the fog that came out from the bay. But that could only last for so long. I think in 1777, Father Serra had to ask the visitor, who was like the head person, for food because all the Native Americans and all the people on the missions were starving. So they had to constantly keep asking for food. And they tried really hard to start an irrigation system, which went from Carmel River to the field, but there was problems with the engineers or the people creating the dams because they would fight over how to create it and which way it should go and all that stuff. They eventually created one in, I think, the early 1800s, but by that time, that's when the missions were over, so it wasn't really a success. The types of food that they grew was wheat, corn, lentils, beans, peas, I think, and then I interviewed Alan Leventhal, who is an archaeologist, ethno historian, and I forget what else, but he also said that they grew tobacco and things like this. They also had cows, goats, sheep, pigs, for ranching, all that stuff. So with the agriculture, their diets changed. It went from a whole bunch of different things to like these few little things. Like corn was always eaten, beans were always eaten. It was like their daily food. It was breakfast through dinner, same things over and over. This is the Mission Carmel now. Before it was just a little church. Now there's a school there, there's a museum, and there's like burial grounds, which I'll show you. So this right here is the cemetery of Native Americans and soldiers. This is like a little cross to commemorate them. I'm sure there's a lot more because there was a population decline for Native Americans at this time. Prior to contact with the Spanish, all of Native Americans, their population was at 310,000, and then at the end of the mission in 1834, it was at 87,000, so there was a rapid decline. In Cosanoan specifically, prior to contact was at 10,000, and then at 1834, it was at, I believe, 900. So it was, the things that affected them was the interaction with the Europeans, because they had a whole bunch of diseases that Native Americans weren't immune to, such as syphilis, smallpox, and I think the measles was one of the big ones. And then another thing was starvation, malnutrition, and malnourishment. So they didn't really get a lot of food. They had cows, which they killed. Supposedly, there was one study I was reading where they killed 900 throughout the whole year, but that was split into 11,000 people in 21 different missions. So it came out to like 0.8 pounds of meat per day, and not everybody got that, and it wasn't enough for the type of labor that they did. They had agriculture was intense. Like they didn't have machines back then. They had to do it by hand or by foot, and just plow the field using cows. That was really inefficient because the grounds there too were really hard. So they had to keep plowing over and over, and it just took too much time, and it just stressed them out, kind of. So that, on top of starvation and all that stuff, they kind of just declined. So now today, after the mission, which ended in 1934 because of the Mexican Revolution, where they were independent from Spain, the Mexicans they still saw the Native Americans as them being the owners of the mission, so they still granted them the land. But when California was annexed as a United States, they were seen as less than human. They didn't want to give them the land because of the gold rush. They thought that all the land that the Native Americans owned had gold on it, so they wanted to kill them off. They wanted them to be out of the state. So there was a whole bunch of lynching and killing and kidnapping, and that decreased the population even more. And then there was treaty signed after the annexation of California for the Native Americans to get land and money, but because of the gold rush, the documents were hidden and they were confidential. It wasn't until 1905 when they came up again, and then after that, they started getting land and money for now reservations and rancherias. I haven't really found a lot of information about them having agriculture on the rancherias. There was one document saying that they did grow potatoes and wheat, but it wasn't as predominant as their cattle. Their main thing was cattle ranching. And so basically the take-home message that I got was biodiversity again for my first presentation with the of the Philippines. Biodiversity is important in plants, animals, and people. Also in diet. Like you can't just eat corn and meat or corn and beef all day, every day, because it doesn't have as much nutrients. If you have like a diverse intake of food, then you have more of a possibility of getting all the nutrients you need. Community was another thing. With the Native Americans, community was everything. You had to grow as one in order for your communities to thrive. Also, they had to like trade with people around them, so that helps them too. And I think that's what we should do, not just just the United States figuring out their own stuff. We have to like look to other people to help us. And then also interconnection was another one. And that's my references. I don't want to put them on the features. Questions?
The Indians had sustainable diets and they were fine. They weren't malnutrition. Until the Spanish came.
They had their own diseases, but it was something that they could deal with. They had their own like medicines for it. I think like ringworms and what else was it? But it wasn't anything that killed off their populations like it did on the mission.